SBS finally breaks its silence. The real impact of Taehyung's star power on Korea today. International SEO headline. SBS breaks its silence. How BTSV is quietly reshaping Korea's cultural, media, and economic landscape. Seoul, South Korea. For the first time in 2 consecutive days, the name Kim Taehyung V of B was not merely mentioned but closely examined by one of South Korea's most influential mainstream broadcasters. This was not a light entertainment segment, nor a viral online gossip piece. It was SBS News, a pillar of national media. SBS's decision to finally break its silence did not happen without careful consideration behind the scenes of Korea's media industry. This move has been described as rare, deliberate, and even bold. Why? Because SBS did not simply report on an idol's activities, it openly acknowledged the tangible, present-day impact of Taehyung's star power on South Korea itself, spanning culture, economics, media influence, and national image. The central question is no longer how popular is Taehyung. It has evolved into something far more consequential. To what extent does Korea now rely on the symbolic power known as Kim Tae? Day 1. When Taehyung's name appeared on SBS News, on the first day, SBS's evening news aired what initially seemed like a standard reporting analysis of the global Korean wave in the post-pandemic era. However, viewers quickly noticed something unusual. The name Taehyung appeared more frequently, for a longer duration, and with greater analytical weight than any other artist mentioned in the report. This was not limited to concert footage. It was not airport fashion coverage. Instead, SBS presented industry data, visual economic impact charts, interviews with cultural analysts, and a carefully framed narrative suggesting that Taehyung now functions as an unofficial national brand of South Korea. Within SBS's newsroom, the editorial decision was described as inevitable. A senior SBS producer, speaking anonymously, revealed internal discussions. We can no longer talk about global Korean culture without mentioning Taehyung. Avoiding him would make our reporting incomplete, dishonest. Day 2, SBS no longer just reports it. Acknowledges if the first day was observational, the second day was in its follow-up segment, SBS used a phrase rarely applied by Korean national broadcasters. The real influence of Taehyung. This phrase marked a turning point. For the first time, SBS implicitly stated that Taehyung is no longer just a BTS member, no longer only a global superstar, but a structural phenomenon with direct consequences for Korea's position on the world stage. Why did SBS speak now? This question immediately spread among fans and media analysts alike. The answer is straightforward, yet heavy, because the impact has grown too large to ignore. Over the past 2 years, every public appearance by Taehyung has triggered global search surges. Brands he wears sell out across continents. Cafes, hotels, galleries, and cities he visits transform into international destinations. But what ultimately pushed SBS to speak was accumulation. A media analyst from Seoul National University explained, SBS is not promoting an idol. They are acknowledging reality. Taehyung has crossed the boundary of entertainment and entered the realm of national soft power. Cultural impact. Taehyung as the emotional face of Korea. One subtle but consistent point emphasized in the SBS report stood out. Taehyung carries Korean emotion to the world, not just through music, not only through fashion, but through facial expressions, gestures, silence, and the way he communicates without explanation. SBS suggested that global audiences no longer view Korea as a distant or unfamiliar country. Instead, Korea has become an emotionally accessible space, and one of the strongest entry points into that space is Taehyung himself. A cultural editor at SBS stated, He does not explain Korea with words. He makes people feel Korea. Media impact. A new standard for idol coverage. SBS's decision to feature Taehyung prominently for 2 consecutive days created a ripple effect. Other broadcasters followed. KBS began referencing Taehyung's fashion impact. MBC explored the scale of his global fanbase. Economic outlets started using the term V effect as a serious analytical concept. Within Korean journalism, this shift is highly unusual. Typically, idols appear in mainstream news only during major scandals, massive comebacks, or extreme international achievements. Taehyung appeared without scandal, without active promotion, without a new album release. He appeared because his presence itself has become newsworthy. Economic impact. What SBS didn't say but everyone understood. Notably, SBS avoided citing exact numbers, and that restraint carried its own message. When a national broadcaster chooses not to display figures, it often means the numbers are already widely known or too sensitive to present directly on public television. Yet economists interviewed by SBS implied one undeniable reality. If Taehyung were suddenly removed from the global cultural map today, Korea would feel the consequences immediately. This was not hyperbole. Such language is typically reserved for major conglomerates or strategic national industries. Fan reactions? Pride, not noise. On social media, the reaction from fans was notably different from typical viral explosions. There were no major fan wars, no excessive hype. Instead, the dominant emotions were pride, gratitude, and quiet validation. One widely shared comment read, "We always knew his power." But hearing SBS say it out loud, it feels different. Taehyung and the weight he never asked for. SBS also touched on a rarely discussed reality, symbolic burden beyond fame. Why Taehyung is structurally different from any global idol before him. Inside Korea's entertainment industry, a quiet consensus within Korea's entertainment industry. There is an unspoken consensus that has grown stronger over the past 2 years. Taehyung is no longer operating within the same framework as other idols. Executives do not say this publicly. Broadcast stations do not frame it explicitly. But internally, the distinction is clear. A senior entertainment strategist working with multiple broadcasting networks explained, "When we plan coverage involving Taehyung, we don't treat it as idol content. We treat it as cultural impact content. This distinction matters. Idol content is episodic. Cultural impact content is structural. Taehyung's presence affects programming decisions, advertising expectations, international licensing strategies, and even diplomatic cultural exchanges. This is not accidental. It is the result of long-term accumulation rather than sudden virality. The difference between global popularity and global authority. Many artists achieve global popularity. Very few achieve global authority. SBS's analysis implicitly places Taehyung in the second category. Global popularity means people recognize your name. Your content travels fast. Your fandom is large. Global authority means your presence shapes taste. Your choices influence behavior. Your silence still generates headlines. Taehyung operates in this second space. An international branding consultant interviewed by SBS summarized it simply: people don't just follow Taehyung. They adjust themselves around him. Why Taehyung cannot be replicated. One of the most striking points in SBS's internal discussion was this: Taehyung cannot be manufactured again. This statement challenges the very foundation of Korea's idol system, which is built on training, replication, and optimization. So why is Taehyung different? 1. Timing. Taehyung emerged at a historical moment when social media removed geographic barriers. Global audiences were searching for authenticity, and Korean culture was transitioning from novelty to influence. 2. Emotional accessibility. Unlike traditional global stars who rely on spectacle, Taehyung's appeal lies in emotional subtlety, restraint, and human vulnerability. This makes him relatable across cultures without translation. 3. Selective visibility. Taehyung does not overexpose himself. Every appearance feels intentional, rare, and therefore valuable. In media economics, scarcity creates authority. Comparisons with past Korean cultural icons, SBS, cautiously introduced comparisons never directly equating Taehyung with past figures, but inviting reflection. Seo Taiji revolutionized Korean music internally, changed how Korea understood pop culture. Bai Yang-chun opened the emotional gateway of Hallyu to East Asia, became a symbol of Korean romantic masculinity. BTS, as a group, globalized Korean pop on an unprecedented scale, proved Korea could lead, not follow. Taehyung, as an individual, operates beyond genre, represents Korea without explaining it, functions as a cultural mirror rather than a messenger. A cultural historian noted, if BTS opened the door, Taehyung redesigned the room. Soft power without official appointment. Perhaps the most sensitive part of S coverage was the implication that Taehyung now functions as a soft power asset without ever being officially designated as one. Governments typically appoint ambassadors, cultural envoys, honorary representatives. Taehyung holds none of these titles, and yet his actions influence tourism. His image shapes Korea's global perception. His name carries diplomatic weight in cultural contexts. A former government advisor commented off, what makes him powerful is that he is not controlled by the state. That independence gives him credibility. Why SBS avoided nationalistic language. One deliberate choice stood out in SBS's reporting. They avoided overt nationalism. There were no slogans, no exaggerated patriotic framing. Instead, the tone remained analytical, restrained, almost cautious. Why? Because overclaiming ownership of Taehyung's influence would risk politicizing his image, alienating global audiences, and reducing authenticity. SBS understood that Taehyung's power works precisely because it feels human, not institutional. The global media lens, how foreign outlets see it internationally. Coverage of Taehyung increasingly places him in categories rarely applied to idols. Cultural icon, style, authority, emotional storyteller, modern muse. Western fashion media, in particular, have shifted language. They no longer describe him as a K-pop idol wearing luxury. Instead, they frame him as a cultural figure redefining luxury through Korean sensibility. This linguistic shift matters. Language defines hierarchy, the risk factor. When influence becomes weight, SBS did not romanticize Taehyung's position entirely. One segment addressed the risk of symbolic overload when one individual carries excessive projection, national expectations, global scrutiny, the margin for personal freedom. A psychologist specializing in celebrity culture explained, the greater the symbolic value, the harder it becomes for the individual to exist privately. SBS posed an unspoken question. Can Korea benefit from Taehyung's influence without consuming him? Taehyung's silence as strategy or instinct. One of the most discussed observations from SBS's analysis was Taehyung's strategic silence. He rarely comments on his influence, claims credit, explains his choices. Whether intentional or instinctive, this silence amplifies impact. In media theory, silence invites projection, and projection fuels myth. The Taehyung effect, how fans, fashion, tourism, and lifestyle industries are being reshaped from fanbase to force when fandom becomes an economic engine. One of the most critical insights emerging from SBS's extended analysis is this. Taehyung's fanbase no longer behaves like a traditional fandom. It operates more like a decentralized economic force, unlike conventional fan communities that mobilize primarily around music, releases, voting, or chart performance. Taehyung's global supporters mobilize around consumption patterns, travel decisions, cultural curiosity, and lifestyle alignment. A global market analyst interviewed by SBS explained, "This is not reactive fandom. This is anticipatory behavior. Fans don't wait for instructions. They observe Taehyung move. This shift changes everything." The luxury industry, from endorsement to cultural translation, luxury brands were among the first to recognize that Taehyung's influence could not be measured using traditional celebrity metrics. Initially, brands viewed him as a high-visibility ambassador, a powerful face for campaigns. Today, many brands describe him internally as something else entirely. Akulturao translator. Why this matters. Traditional luxury marketing relies on aspiration. Taehyung's presence introduces identification. Consumers do not want to imitate him. They want to inhabit the world, he suggests. SBS cited multiple industry insiders who confirmed products associated with Taehyung experience long-tail demand. Resale markets surge rather than collapse, and brand perception shifts toward emotional depth rather than status display. A European fashion executive noted, "With Taehyung, we don't sell products, we sell atmosphere." Tourism, movement without campaigns. Perhaps the most quietly powerful impact discussed by SBs is tourism. Unlike government-backed tourism campaigns that rely on slogans and visuals, Taehyung's influence operates without instruction. He does not say, "Visit this place. Come to this city." Yet, when he appears, cafes become landmarks. Neighborhoods gain international visibility. Previously, local spaces turn into global points of interest. SBS highlighted a striking pattern. Visitors often describe their trips not as Korea tourism, but as following Taehyung's emotional trail. A Seoul tourism official admitted, "We don't promote these locations, but we prepare for the aftermath, lifestyle imitation without consumer fatigue." One of the paradoxes of Taehyung's influence is the absence of fatigue. In most cases, repeated exposure to celebrity-driven trends leads to saturation, backlash, or disinterest. With Taehyung, the opposite occurs. Why? Because he does not repeat himself. He does not brand everything, and he does not over-explain. SBS described this as low-frequency influence. Low frequency sustains curiosity. High frequency destroys meaning. Case study. When silence outperforms campaigns. SBS devoted a full segment to analyzing moments when Taehyung said nothing, yet generated maximum impact. Examples included unannounced public appearances, casual outfit choices, offstage photography moments. In each case, global engagement spiked, media coverage multiplied, consumer behavior followed. A digital strategist summarized, "This is influence without call to action, and that is the most powerful form." Why other idols cannot replicate the formula, SBS was careful not to frame Taehyung's success as a model to be. In fact, analysts warned against it. Attempting to replicate his influence through forced scarcity, artificial mystery, or engineered authenticity would likely fail. Because Taehyung's power is not a strategy, it is an outcome. An industry veteran put it bluntly, "You can't manufacture someone people trust emotionally." The global lens. Why non-fans are paying attention. One of the most telling indicators of Taehyung's cultural reach is the attention he receives from non-fans. SBS noted increased mentions in art, design, and architecture spaces, references in academic discussions of soft power, and inclusion in global culture editorials unrelated to music. This suggests a crucial shift. Taehyung is no longer consumed as content. He is referenced as context, economic spillover, beyond entertainment metrics, SBS, emphasized that Taehyung's influence creates spillover effects, rarely captured in official statistics. These include increased interest in Korean language learning, demand for Korean literature and visual arts, long-term brand loyalty toward Korean products. An economist explained, these are second and third layer effects. Governments love them because they last longer than any single campaign. Generational reach, not just youth culture, contrary to assumptions. Taehyung's audience is not limited to younger demographics. SBS cited data showing strong engagement among millennials and older consumers, cross-generational appeal driven by nostalgia, aesthetics, and emotional resonance. This breadth strengthens his role as a cultural bridge, not a trend figure. The long view sustainability over virality. One of the most important conclusions in part 3 is this. Taehyung's influence is structurally sustainable. It does not depend on constant releases, algorithmic manipulation, or shock value. Instead, it relies on trust, emotional continuity, and cultural consistency.